Hi, it's Alison from Ancestral Kitchen. Welcome back to the second video in my series on sourdough porridge and polenta. Moving on from our first video, which was all about sourdough porridge, I want to talk about sourdough polenta in this video. And when I hear the word polenta, mostly I think about corn, and I think most people do. That's the most famous type of polenta. But the truth is you can make polenta, and in the past people did make polenta from any type of grain. So I'm going to show you a polenta you can make and you can ferment using really any type of whole grain. First of all, let's talk about why you would want to do this. Now, firstly, there's the whole grain aspect, which means you're getting all of the goodness of the kernel of the seed. Then there's the fermentation, which will pre-digest some of the foodstuffs in the grain and make it easier on your own body. And then you'll get also all the additional benefits of fermentation. Even though you'll be cooking the polenta, there are still benefits to the fact that you're fermenting it. And thirdly, there is the taste, which is fizzy and a bit sour and really, really, really good. In the case of the polenta, there's an additional benefit, which is I tend to cook up quite a lot of it, and then I have food to feed my family for a week, really. I'll show you in the next video how you can make a polenta bread, which is an easy way of keeping this and then carry on eating it for the rest of the week. So let's talk about what you need. So the first thing you need are whole grains, and I've got two examples to show you here. The first one is a sorghum whole grain. I hope you can see that on the camera. And then secondly, I've got a millet whole grain. You could use any whole grain for this. I've used buckwheat, I've used farro, I've used barley, I've used oats, any whole grain. You need a way to grind those whole grains. So you could have obviously a grain grinder, but you could also use a coffee grinder, you could use your food processor, you could use any way, a Vitamix even, that you can grind those grains. They don't need to be really finely ground, but they do need to be coarsely ground, minimum. If you don't have a grinder, obviously you can buy whole grain flour and you could use that instead. You're also going to need a bowl to put the ground grains into and a cover for that. And you're going to need a starter to start the fermentation. I'm going to show you sourdough starter discard, but you could use any type of kefir. You could use yogurt, you could use apple cider vinegar, you could use whey, or you could use kraut juice. Anything that's got those active bacteria in it. I think that's all you need. This is a bit more complicated than the porridge, but it's simple once you get used to it. So let's talk about what you need to do. The first thing is you need to grind those whole grains. And I've got a mix which I really like to do for this here, which is 50% sorghum and 50% millet. And I've ground those in a grinder. You can see they're relatively coarse. There's 450 grams here, which for sorghum at least is just over 2 cups. I got this much because I'm going to make a polenta bread with it when I've first eaten the first bit, the leftovers I'll make the bread with. If you want less, just scale this to suit you. You'll need to cover that with water, and I do ample water here. Usually I do around 550 to 650 millilitres of water, depending on the grain. I think that's around 19 fluid ounces, a bit more. And then you'll need your starter. So I'm going to show you sourdough starter because I've always got a discard hanging around. But as I said, you could use any type of starter as long as it's got active bacteria in it. And I'm going to take, I think, around 15 grams of starter. You can see it's kind of almost a tablespoon probably. I'm going to plop that in my mixture. And then I'm going to stir that really well to kind of break up the starter and distribute it amongst the grains. Once this is all stirred in, I'm going to leave this in a warm place. And in the summer and spring and autumn mostly, I leave that just on the counter here in Italy. But in the winter, I pop it into a warm space that I've got for my ferments. And generally, I will leave it at least overnight. Sometimes I'll leave it longer. I've gone up to 3 days. If I leave it for longer than 1 day, I will stir it every day because the top of it is exposed to oxygen and you want to keep that moving so you don't get anything that you don't want growing on the top. So if you leave it for longer than a day, remember to stir it every day. So there we go, that's all stirred in nicely, and I'm just going to pop my lid on. You will know that it's fermenting, that it's fermented well, because you will see some changes in your grains. I've got one here which I've done in glass for you, which is really good to be able to see. This one's been fermenting overnight. It's summer here in Italy, so it's very warm. And there are bubbles on the top and bubbles in the side, and also sometimes it separates, so you can see separation. You can see bubbles in the side there, which show you that it's fermenting and it's active. Oh, that's heavy. So once you're happy with the fermentation, then you can cook it. This is cooked on the stove in a saucepan, and you will need to put a lot more water in it. Depending on your type of grain and how you like your consistency, generally I will put the same amount of water that I put in for the fermentation again when I cook. You will also need to stir it well when it's cooking, otherwise it will go lumpy. It will take a fair time to cook. So I would say this, which is half millet, half sorghum, will take me probably 25 minutes to cook on the stove, stirring almost constantly. If it's fermented enough for you, which you can tell by the bubbles and also by the smell, smells fermented, you can then leave this in the fridge for a while until you're ready to use it. The fridge will slow the fermentation down, and then you can pull it out in a day's time, 2 days, 3 days time even, and cook it up when you're ready. I think that is everything. You can eat it warm, obviously. You can eat it like a porridge. Even though it's a polenta, it's a porridge too. You can put it in the fridge when it's been cooked and then bring it out, eat it cold. You can reheat it, add a little bit more liquid to it when you're reheating it. It will go softer and more fluid in its consistency. Or you can make sourdough polenta bread, which will be in my next video. Before I go, if you like what I'm up to and want to have more news from my kitchen, I do a regular newsletter which you can pop your details in to receive if you wish at the top of every page of my site, www.ancestralkitchen.com, and I'll see you in the next video for polenta bread.